Hello? This is Hattori. This time we're looking at Hoyulsa-il-jjok, a game that was pretty popular at little stationary shops with arcade machines. I made the profile picture a silhouette and remember thinking it was hard. The character I chose, both back then and now, is Jinnyeom, my favorite monk from Hoyulsa-il-jjok. I remember that not just me, but all the kids who were at the arcade back then liked this character the most. Usually people called the monk cleaning. I think it was because his outfit and the 6 dots made him look like cleaning. This game's background is a family feud. Basically, if you become the head of this family, you gain enormous wealth and power. You may see why the Asian monk is in this fight, but you might wonder why the Native American, who seems like an outsider, is involved in this family feud. According to the story, it starts in the Edo period, and as the descendants spread out over time, even a Native American, not a Japanese person, became a blood relative of this family. Go Goketsuki Shinzuro, the root of this family, is considered the ancestor of the bloodline. He reportedly married Sasaki Kojiro's cousin's daughter, Musashi's rival. The man is said to be the secret son of Yagyu Jubei. The man from this family is an Indian and a 5th generation descendant. The character I chose is a 5th generation descendant, so they're from the same generation in the family line. But what's interesting is that right now, Indian is this family's direct line heir. What I'm saying is that useless monk narrowed it down to the family's direct line heir. If the elders of the family find out, they'll be absolutely furious. It was a fight between the direct line heir from the eldest son's branch and a monk whose name you can only find at the very back of the family register. They were 10th cousins by kinship, but elders then still saw this as close family. You get the idea, right? Choi Min-sik and Kim Young-soo are reportedly 10th cousins in Nameless Gangster. People usually expect a hot-blooded or charismatic main character in fighting games, but in the Hoyulsa clan, the main character is the grandmother Otane, who's currently fighting. Otane is the 3rd generation in her family, making her old enough to be Taejung's grandmother. The character's basic foundation was copied from Chun-Li in Street Fighter II. Otane, the main character of the Hoyulsa clan Part 1, is a twin character with the final boss. In the story, she wins the first part and takes the position of the clan leader. Usually, when you think of a main character, they either fight for justice at the very least, or even if they look like a villain, they actually have a kind heart. Otane is a character who purely seeks wealth and power, and even goes further to become a crazy villain who wants to swallow up the world. Grandma's basic grab has a unique ability that allows her to become younger. She gives a creepy kiss and transforms into quite a beauty. The character's skills change a lot. After aging, she stops using her usual moves and instead shoots things like dentures. I don't know why. The character herself looks very similar to Annie Hamilton. I still think she's prettier than Annie. With her fiery power, she defeated the Great Elder Adina, and she's Taejung's 3rd cousin. I still see my distant relatives at family events from time to time, so in a way, you could say we're actually pretty closely related. Just so you know, I'm my family's 13th generation direct line heir. This is Keith Wayne, a character who looks like the protagonist. Goketsuchapa is hard to say, so I'll just call it the Kongaru group. Keith Wayne is a 5th generation Kongaru descendant and the First Stage Indian's 3rd cousin. He kept competing against his 3rd cousin, Indian, who was in his generation and lost every time.
Huh?
A collateral relative gets scolded for talking back to the direct line heir. Keith's backstory is that he lost his mother early and believes it was because of his father, which led him to become a delinquent. But even so, this level of delinquency is pretty mild. If you've seen the story of Geese Howard that we covered before, you'll know that Keith, just like Geese, lost his mother early and became a delinquent because he blamed his father. And Geese went full dark, becoming the ultimate power behind Southtown, ruling from the shadows, and became such a cool villain that he even appeared in Tekken 7, gaining a lot of popularity. But Keith just feels like a half-baked punk, so I don't find his backstory all that appealing. While others wear cool outfits that suit fighting, Keith just looks good and wears something like he's just going to the convenience store to buy cigarettes, so there's nothing stylish about him at all. By the way, the next part is a bonus stage, so it's not fun at all. I'll just speed it up. I've already simplified the character, so let's cut the car smashing part too. This is too boring. The next character is Hattori Saizo, who only looks cool in his profile illustration. First, we need to point something out. That ninja guy looks pretty tall, even taller than the character I'm playing right now. For reference, Jinnyeom's profile height is 183 centimeters, Hattori's profile height is 175 centimeters. I don't know if they made the settings first and then created the character, or if they made the character first and then added the settings, but either way, somebody needs an ass kicking. Honestly, even the character design is a bit odd. If you look at the illustration, you can definitely tell it's supposed to be a ninja, but when you see the character's helmet in the actual appearance, it looks a lot like an American football player's helmet. So when I was a kid, I even thought that a football player was fighting like a ninja. Saizo and the monk are fourth cousins, and they're in the same generation. He usually runs a pharmacy, but according to the story, he is 23 years old. He's just 24 in Korean age, but as a pharmacy owner, he must have passed the pharmacist exam quickly. He looks handsome without his helmet and is talented, but the story says he has social anxiety. He's a character with little family contact, so there's not much else to say about him. The next character is Annie Hamilton, who appears in Hoyulsa-il-jjok Part 1, and among the female characters, she has one of the more normal designs. She is a 10th cousin to Taengjung and is in the same generation. She is the only daughter of a wealthy family who fights using aerobics and martial arts. She's basically the typical spoiled rich girl character, but honestly, when I was a kid and didn't know her background, I just thought she looked like some kind of raggedy woman based on her design. Even if you call it aerobics and dress her up, would anyone actually think she's rich? Annie has something in common with Kiss, whom I criticized for showing up in a terrible fighting outfit. In the Pogi series, Annie ends up marrying Kiss and even has a child with him. Fortunately, Kiss and Annie are 10th cousins, so it seems to be okay. Even in Korea, it's a legal marriage once they're beyond 8th cousins. As for the design, Annie's base is exactly like Grandma's, they just copied Chun-Li outright. In Street Fighter 2, the World Warrior, Chun-Li is strong, but Annie is the weakest when played by the user. That's just how it is. When the CPU controls Annie, getting caught even once can make the game spiral out of control. The biggest reason is that some of Annie's moves require charge commands, but the crazy CPU doesn't bother charging at all and just pulls off the moves whenever it wants. The next character is Angela Belt, who is said to be the strongest in the Hoyulsa 1 series. According to the story, she's 187 centimeters tall and only weighs 77 kilograms, but still has a crazy big build. They took Zangief from Street Fighter 2 and turned him into a female character. Her neutral stance is similar, and her boots design is almost identical, which proves it. Even the fighting style in her background is listed as professional wrestling, so it's obviously similar. However, in terms of techniques, she has a completely different style of attacks compared to Zangief. Honestly, until I saw that her fighting style was listed as professional wrestling, I thought circus was her fighting type. Angela is a 10th cousin of Taengjung and is of the same generation, but she is an 8th cousin to Annie Hamilton, who was on the previous stage. In Korean terms, a 10th cousin is a 4th cousin, while an 8th cousin is a 3rd cousin. Since Annie, an 8th cousin, is a 3rd cousin, there would be some family interaction, leading to a setting where they are both rivals and friends. Angela, a pro wrestler and biker gang leader, is said to have the background bikers as her subordinates. Honestly, if you set aside the insanely pumped up muscles, I think her face alone is actually pretty. Right now, in the first part of Hoyo's side, she's fighting with that Zangief-like body, but as the series goes on, the character gradually changes to look more feminine. Her thick build stays the same, so don't get your hopes up or search for changes. The next stage is a boring bonus round with nothing interesting, so I'll speed it up immediately. Finally, it's the mirror match. Actually, this is also the mirror match setup I saw the most at those little neighborhood shops with arcade machines. All day long, they just throw talismans at each other, and when one hit, they'd rush in and quickly close the distance. That was the only tactic used. In Japanese, it's pronounced chinin. In Japan, when people think of a monk or someone with a shaved head, one of the names that comes to mind is Chinin. Although his name has a cute origin, he looks quite fierce. His design clearly shows he's from the Shaolin Temple, anyone can see that. His stern face and shaved head made me think he was a devoted monk, but after checking his background, I found out he's actually a fallen monk who can't resist food, alcohol, or women. But that doesn't mean he's a villain. He doesn't commit crimes or harm others. He's a character who stays true to his own desires, and back in the day, a lot of kids chose him because he was easy to play and strong. Among all the shaved head characters, he was probably the most popular. In the first game, his background was a temple because of his monk image, but starting from the second game, the background changed to a club where several monks are just hanging out. It seems like the Hoyulsa-il-jjok team put a lot of effort into this character, but in terms of the story, he doesn't have much influence. As I mentioned earlier, since he only pursues his own pleasure, he comes across as more of a supporting character in a side story. Next is another character who seems like a main character, Uyama Reiji. Along with Jinnyeom, he was a character with a very high pick rate. He's a character who feels like a shonen manga protagonist, joining the tournament not for the boss, but to test himself. With that background, he could have been the main character, but as I said, Hami is the main character. Remember when there was a moveless label on top of the Uyama arcade machine? Also, up until the 1990s, it was awkward to use names that sounded too Japanese, so this character's name was even changed to Baekta-san at one point. Now, when you hear Baekta-san, of course the first thing that comes to mind is Baekta-san from Tekken, and among all the localized names, I think the best one is probably Slam Dunk. Kang Baek-ho is Sakuragi, and Seo Tai-woong is Rukawa, but it's still hard to match them up. Going back to the story of Baekta-san, the honorary Korean, he was actually acknowledged by the strongest fighter. He was even part of Rugal's statue collection, the eternal boss from the King of Fighters series. Mr. Rugal's hobby of turning the world's strongest fighters, including some questionable rivals, into statues makes it a truly elite collection. Ome, the current head, is now on the final stage. That was basically a scene where he says he's the head of this clan. She is the older twin sister of Otane, the other old lady we faced earlier. She's basically the same character as Otane, but since she's a boss character, her AI is much higher, so her attacks are much fiercer. She catches you while you're stunned and rejuvenates herself. According to the story, she's supposed to be a better fighter than her twin sister. Earlier, I mentioned that Otane is a crazy villain, but Ome is pretty insane too. It's said that at the age of 18, she beat up her own mother to become the head of the family. A character who becomes the best by committing such an immoral act actually did it before Arthas from Warcraft. While Arthas at least goes on to become the cool Lich King, the Lord of the Scourge, Ome Ohoni just stayed as the head of the family for 60 years and didn't really do anything else. Looking at the messed up family tree, neither Ohone nor Otane had any children. They were likely too greedy, fearing children would force them to share their possessions. Ohone, the boss from the first game, got married but later divorced because of personality differences. The character Ohone married appears in episode 2 and joins the fight for revenge on Ohone. FYI, it was a marriage between relatives within the 7th degree, which is not allowed in Korea. The grandmother was a 3rd generation descendant, and her husband was a 4th generation descendant, so the grandmother had a higher generational rank. Although the husband was a lower generation, he was 4 years older than the grandmother, which is interesting. This time, instead of talking about game strategies, I talked about the interesting family tree and story. As a Korean, I find these messy family stories entertaining. Honestly, with fighting games like this, I question what strategy is needed against the computer. That's all from Dolly for now. If you enjoyed the video, I'd appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you.